Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Get more out of life. Go out to a movie.
Hello and Merry Christmas. Welcome to The Only Kid with a Camera. I'm John Blackstone, and this episode is the third in a three-part series that I've been doing on the Star Wars phenomenon. Today's episode I'm affectionately calling the first Star Wars Christmas, because I'm going to be discussing what it was like to be a kid in 1977 waiting for Christmas Day. Now, Star Wars, the first film, had been released in May of 1977, and so obviously by December there had been enough time for a pretty good wave of cool Star Wars stuff to come out. And yet, the creme de la creme, the stuff that us kids were really waiting for, was not released on time, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. As all of you know by now, I was the first person in the world to receive a Darth Vader mask from Don Post Studios. I went there personally and got it. And they told me that I was the first. And of course, I couldn't live with just the Darth Vader mask. I had to have the others as well. So I did before that first December of 1977, I ended up buying the Stormtrooper mask. And then lastly, I bought the Chewbacca mask. And I still have all these masks, of course, and I'm happy to have them. They did put out a C-3PO mask, and I didn't like that mask. And some of you might relate to this. It was basically just like a rubber mask. It wasn't even made of hard material, and it was just I didn't like it. Didn't think it was cool. But man, the Darth Vader mask and the Stormtrooper mask and Chewbacca mask were very cool. So as we're nearing December of 1977, I have collected a lot of stuff, a lot of cool stuff. I was basically buying everything I could get my hands on, from the more official cool stuff that came out, like the Super 8 movies, to more silly stuff, like Peaches and notebooks, notepaper pads and stuff like that. I just pretty much bought everything. There was a really cool series of posters that came out from Burger King, and I bought all those. And by the way, all of this stuff I still have, of course, just so you know. And another cool thing I thought of the other day was they put out this album, which was called The Story of Star Wars. And it was just a two-sided vinyl album. I'm sure some of you guys have it out there. And it was, looking back on it, it's kind of cheesy. And I remember even at the time thinking, this is kind of cheesy, mainly because of the narration, which I'll play a little bit for you right now.
C-3PO, a bronze, human-like robot, frantically searches the battle-torn ship for R2-D2, his stubby mechanical friend. But at that moment, not far away, a desperate Princess Leia hurriedly programs the little robot with secret information that could save the rebel cause. Then she disappears into the smoke-filled corridor as 3PO appears.
It just didn't hit me quite right, but I was so happy to have it, because it was this high fidelity audio from the movie, and listening to that on stereo, and especially like listening on my headphones, it was so cool to hear the soundtrack, because that soundtrack was amazing on Star Wars. So we had the Story of Star Wars album came out, and of course there was a double album set of the motion picture soundtrack, the actual orchestral score written by John Williams. To me, the original soundtrack score for Star Wars A New Hope, which I don't call it A New Hope, it's just Star Wars, okay? But that soundtrack is absolutely amazing. It has so many separate themes that were composed for each character, and it's just a magnificent soundtrack. I had it on vinyl. I listened to it all the time. I still love it. I still listen to that music, and I know every nook and cranny of that score. I had seen Star Wars 40 times within the first year that it came out. And by now, I'm sure I've seen it well over 500, if not more times. So believe me, when I listen to that soundtrack, I'm basically watching the movie in my head. I see every scene. But it's an amazing soundtrack and an amazing score. I believe that it's John Williams' best score, and I don't think that that's coincidental, because he had that huge success with Jaws. And basically overnight, he went from scoring TV shows and kind of lower grade movies, suddenly became the man in terms of motion picture music scores. And to me, when he did the Star Wars job, it just sounds like he just indulged everything that he had in his tool chest, everything that he had been learning through the years, and everything that inspired him, because that soundtrack is truly inspired. It really is an amazing piece of work. On top of the actual orchestral soundtrack, we had this horrible disco song. I can't even call it a song. It was a single, a 45 that came out of the Star Wars theme, essentially twisted and mauled into this disco song. I mean, check this out. It's just so awful. And I have to say that I hated it then as much as I do now. You know, I was a Star Wars fanatic, but I was not let me put it this way. I was a discerning Star Wars fan. I was not someone that just thought that everything to do with Star Wars was great. I've never been that kind of fan. And I'm not saying that arrogantly. It's just, you know, when I see cheese, I see it, and I don't want anything to do with it. I don't care if it has Star Wars stamped on it or not. As I was continuing to collect the cool Star Wars stuff that was coming out, it's interesting for me to look back, because I bought 2 of everything, which is so weird, because, you know, I was only 13 years old, and the whole collectible thing was not like it is now. It was not like that back then. You know, nowadays, every toy that comes out is special collector's edition and this and that. And now that everything is collectible, nothing is collectible. But I did buy a lot of stuff. One of the cooler things that I bought was, there was a guy, and you had to order this like from the back of this magazine. I think I found it in one of these off the beaten path Star Wars magazines, because there was a bunch of publishers that were just throwing magazines out because they knew that some people would buy anything that had photographs in it of Star Wars. And I bought some of that stuff depending on how cool the photographs were inside. But I remember one of these magazines had an ad in the back where you could purchase actual frames from a 35 millimeter print of Star Wars. Someone had literally had a reel of Star Wars in 35 millimeter, and they were cutting it and selling it. You could buy, like, maybe they'd cut a strip of 3 frames from the movie. And I purchased a lot of those, and man, they were super cool to have. In fact, I used to buy them and then have them professionally mounted in slide frames, the little cardboard slide frames. And I also had several of them printed into large color prints, because it was literally just right off of the film. And they made these beautiful color prints out of them. And so that was something I was really into, and I tried to buy as many as I could, but they were really expensive. In the last episode, I showed you the whole adventure that I went on in terms of purchasing Star Wars on Super 8 movie film, and how awesome it was to actually own a print of Star Wars. And I showed it in my little theater that I built in my bedroom, and charged the neighborhood kids 25 cents a piece to watch. But now, Kenner Toys, one of the things that they did put out before Christmas of that year was it was called the Star Wars Movie Viewer, and it was a hand-cranked movie viewer. I'm sure some of you have seen these things before, but now Kenner had put out a lot of films. Like they put out several Disney films, Pinocchio, which actually I just found recently, which you can see. I'm going to show here. So I, of course, had to have those, and so I bought. There was 5 different cartridges available. The funny thing is that the actual amount of film that was in each cartridge was literally like 1 minute worth of film. I cracked one open, and that's what you're looking at right now. This is actually one of the 1 minute reels of film that were in these cartridges. And it's so weird because it's literally just a hodgepodge of scenes. There's no chronological order to any of it. What you're looking at is literally one of these cartridges, and they go from one thing to another, jumps all over the place. But man, I mean, in the day when there was no such thing as home video, any way that you could actually watch Star Wars at home was just so cool. Another thing that I was really into was the posters. The first poster I bought was the original theatrical poster that was displayed at the UA Cinema 150 Theater. And to me, this is the Star Wars poster to me. This is the original. It's so classy and so classic and elegant, and just, I love it. And so I did buy this poster. There was a shop in Seattle that sold movie posters, and they ordered it especially for me. It's a real print. It's not like a copy. It's and I still have it today. I have it framed on the wall. And I did buy several other posters in that same year, that very first year that Star Wars was being played in the theaters. And ultimately, after Star Wars had played in theaters for 1 year, they released this vintage kind of antique style poster, almost like an Indiana Jones looking kind of vibe. But I love this poster. I absolutely love it. It's one of my most prized possessions, and I have it framed in my home theater. Those 2 movie posters are my favorite out of all of my movie posters. I bought several collections of 8x10 prints, black and white prints. I bought like the theater lobby card sets. I bought the models that you assemble. I loved Darth Vader's TIE Fighter. I had to have that. I think that Darth Vader's TIE Fighter is so cool. Such a cool design. All of the ships in Star Wars in the original film are so beautiful. But I really, really have always loved Darth Vader's TIE Fighter. So I bought that. Of course, I bought the 1978 Star Wars calendar, which was really cool. It was an official release, and it had a lot of really beautiful glossy images in it. Another really cool thing was the Star Wars portfolio, which featured these paintings that Ralph McQuarrie had done when he was working with George Lucas to visualize some of the ideas that George Lucas had included in his script. And these are really beautiful paintings. I mean, just beautiful. And I loved that. I thought that was such a cool thing to have. Of course, with the success of Star Wars, we knew there was going to be trading cards released. And sure enough, I bought them. I had to have every card in each series. I bought Series 1, Series 2, Series 3, Series 4. I have all of them. I have every card in every series. And every occasionally I think about looking through them to see if I have any of the really valuable ones. There's some odds and ends, like misprints and things like that. I don't even want to look at them because I don't want to sell them. And I'm afraid that if I find one that's really valuable, that I'll be tempted to sell it. So I don't even look. But yeah, I have all those cards, and they were so fun to collect. I mean, I would just basically just buy, a whole case at a time, and then, put them together, and like, which ones am I missing? And then, so those are cool. Those are cool, especially the first series, the blue series. I have a real fondness in my heart for those because they were the first. I remember receiving the Kenner Star Wars board game for Christmas. In fact, I have this funny footage. My sister opened the package thinking that the present was hers. So I have this footage of her holding this Star Wars board game, and she's looking at it going, why did you give this to me? And I was thinking the same thing. Why did they give her the board game? And then it turns out it was mine. So it was kind of an odd way to be surprised. One of the publications that was fun to collect were the Star Wars official poster monthlies. And the reason they were so cool is because they had really cool articles in them, and they would fold out into a poster. Each one of them folded out into a full-size poster. And they just had cool photographs from the film, nice, glossy, beautiful photographs, which is just, I love that kind of stuff. There was this explosion of people that were trying to cash in on this sci-fi fad that was happening. So there was a lot of things that came out. One of the things that I was super excited about was Battlestar Galactica, which was a television series that came out. The special effects were done by John Dykstra, who was the special effects supervisor in Star Wars, really the guy that made the special effects in Star Wars so spectacular. I was very excited about Battlestar Galactica for that reason. However, upon watching the first episode, I became significantly less excited. And I think I made it through about 2 or 3 episodes and then I gave up. I did not like that show. And even the cool special effects were not enough to make me interested in it beyond the first couple of episodes. But there was a lot of other stuff coming out. I mean, there was already talk of Star Trek, the motion picture, being made, and obviously it was the success of Star Wars that caused Paramount Pictures to say, hey, we have this franchise Star Trek that we could cash in on. But I was super excited about that, for that to come out. Now, of course, Close Encounters of the Third Kind also came out. I really liked that film. I loved Jaws. Jaws is one of my all-time favorite films, if not, one of my top 1 or 2, along with Star Wars. Spielberg was going to direct Close Encounters, and I was excited about it. And I liked it. I really did like it, but it was a different kind of movie, different kind of thing, and it doesn't hold the same appeal. It hasn't stood the test of time for me the way that Star Wars does, although I do still enjoy watching it. I do like it. The interest in science fiction was so huge that even James Bond had to get 007 had to go to space. And this is an example of one of those things where, my friends and I, we always went to see every James Bond movie that came out from the time we were like 12 years old on. And so we're thinking, wow, James Bond is going to go to space. Cool. It didn't turn out to be so cool. But I remember Bruce and I sitting in there and kind of just nudging each other like halfway through, like, this is so bad. We definitely were not on board with everything that Hollywood was throwing at us. And that was one of them. That's just simply an awful film. And we loved James Bond too. So that was a big disappointment. As you all know by now, I had been making Super 8 movies from the time I was about 8 years old, 7 years old. So by this time, Bruce and I, again, had made many films, which I've shown you clips of here and there. And I'll be going much more into depth about that whole part of the 70s for me as a kid and for us as kids. We were really into making movies because we were movie fanatics. So one of the things that we tried to do was to try our hand at some special effects. Now I want to show you some of the special effects that we did with my Super 8 camera. And I think that these are really interesting. Check these out. So one of the first things that we did was we wanted to try and create the effect of a laser gun. And so Bruce and I thought, how can we do it? And so we decided to try scraping the emulsion off of the movie film to see what it looked like. And so once we got an idea of how we could do a laser, then we started working on explosions. Now that was just a little thing that we made that would blow up. Now here, every one of those blasts is a poke of a needle. And then I would have Bruce run out and pose in a certain position and freeze, and then we'd put an explosive on his back. And same thing here. I run up, bang, and it would be a matter of freezing. So like Daniel, my friend Daniel, he ran to a position, then we put the thing on his leg with the intention of showing the laser hitting him, hitting where the explosion goes. Now here's some of the laser blasts here. And it was so hard to do this using a needle, as you can imagine. I mean, Super 8 film is just this tiny little tiny little strip of film. So it's very imperfect. But this was, what else were we couldn't think of any other way to do it. So this is how we tried to do it. I think it's, pretty admirable that we at least tried. And then we tried to color the scratches too, as you can see kind of the red tint. There's another one of the explosions. Oh, it's actually, some of them turn out really pretty amazing. If you could actually see the size of Super 8 movie film, it's almost miraculous that we actually were able to do what we did. Now, this is a time that we tried to do an actual matte shot, which any of you people out there that know about special effects, especially older special effects, was you would block off a part of the picture with the intention of filling in the blocked off part afterwards. And I had purchased this really cool little unit that it actually allowed you to take the Super 8 movie cartridge out of the camera. So we shot that part of the Stormtrooper, and then you pulled the cartridge out, rewound it, and then you could reshoot something and expose what was in the black part. And we just did a test just to see what the matte looked like, and it looked so bad that we were like, nah, it's not even worth trying it. But we did try to do some space effects, and I think that these are actually pretty impressive for what we were working with. We built a spaceship, little cool little spaceship model. This is our attempt at doing special effects, and an explosion, and then ultimately like a big supernova kind of effect. It's pretty cool, I think. Pretty impressive for, 13, 14-year-old kids trying to create something out of nothing. From the beginning of this series, I've been making the claim that I was the first Star Wars nerd, the first Star Wars geek, whatever you want to call me, the fanatic. I was saying that, kind of tongue-in-cheek, but honestly, after I've researched and looked at everything that I did in regards to Star Wars, I actually believe it's true. So if any of you want to debate that or present your evidence to the contrary, I'd love to see it. And I'd love to present it to our little community. Now, from May until December, there were several months to anticipate Christmas. So, that Christmas, that very first Star Wars Christmas, as I called it, I was so excited because my parents knew that all I wanted was Star Wars stuff, okay? Along with every other kid. Somewhere along the line between May and December of 1977, we started hearing that Kenner Toys was going to release this collection of Star Wars toys. And this is where it gets into a really funny story that some of you know, but I'd like to give you kind of perspective for those of us that really went through it. At some point, it became obvious that basically Kenner Toys did not anticipate what was going to happen with Star Wars. And as a result of that, they had some, but not all the really cool stuff they didn't have ready for Christmas of 1977. So what Kenner came up with was this package that parents could buy for their kids, so there's something to put under the Christmas tree. It was the Star Wars Early Bird Certificate Package. I knew what this thing was. I knew I was going to get it for Christmas. It was wrapped, and it was obvious what it was. It was just basically a slab of cardboard. And this cardboard opened up to basically create a display stand. And you would eventually, once you got your hands on these figures, you would affix them to the spots on the cardboard stand to match the figures and the illustrations behind them. And it came with this certificate that you filled out and you mailed it in. And that was kind of like your promissory note that Kenner was going to ship these figures to you. Even though the figures weren't actually even included, the excitement for me and all kids was very palpable. So anyway, that was the Star Wars Early Bird Certificate package. Now, Kenner obviously went on to release a ton of really cool stuff besides the figures. I bought the X-Wing fighter, I bought the Land Speeder, I bought the TIE fighter. I also bought some of the larger dolls, like they made these 12-inch dolls that were really cool. I had Luke and I had Darth Vader. And so Kenner ended up putting out a lot of really cool stuff, that first Star Wars Christmas, even though we didn't have the mother load of the Kenner toys, we had the promise of it. and you know what? It was exciting and it was fun. And I will never forget the excitement of knowing that on Christmas morning I was going to open that up and that I had something to look forward to. Speaking of Christmas, I would be amiss if I did not mention the Star Wars holiday special. If you haven't heard of it, it's a notoriously awful television show, and I will tell you that as a kid, I was very excited about it, and when I watched it, it was so disappointing, and it was actually depressing because, Star Wars was important to me, and it was if something that was really important, and really to me, even today, looking at it, is a legitimate, legendary film. It sits amongst those classic films like Lawrence of Arabia, The Godfather. It was a serious film. I know Star Wars is considered kind of a novelty to a lot of people now, but that first film was like a legitimate work of art. It's a great achievement in filmmaking, and I knew what good film was. I was a film buff, and even though as a kid I had taste, that Star Wars holiday special was so terrible. And I remember thinking, if Star Wars, if they can go this low so quickly, this is not a good sign of where things are heading. And I was only to be proven right. But I won't go into that because I don't want to ruin it for anyone that those eventual Star Wars films are important to. But, ultimately we enter into 1978, and then I continue to see Star Wars every weekend pretty much. And in May of 1978, the 1-year anniversary of Star Wars was celebrated. And that film had been playing for a year solid in several theaters, including my beloved UA Cinema 150. And I was there for the birthday celebration that day. They made this series of cool posters that were celebrating the 1-year birthday of Star Wars, and I was there for that. I went in my Darth Vader costume, and of course people were totally freaking out because not everybody was doing that in those days. In fact, I was the only person there that was dressed up with the full. There were other people that were dressed up, but not with a cool Darth Vader outfit and with the mask and everything. I was the only one. So, of course, I went to the 10-year anniversary. In 1997, I went to the release of the special editions. I won't go too much into that, but I was not happy. And I still, to this day, think that was a colossal mistake to do that, particularly with the first film, because the first film was basically like The Wizard of Oz. It was a classic piece of cinema, and it should not have been toyed with. But, I didn't make it, so Lucas can do what he wants with it. It's his, and he certainly has done whatever he wants to do with it. But anyway, this is my story of Star Wars, and it was such a wonderful experience and such a fun time in my life, and still have such a fond affection for this movie. I have purchased it in countless forms. I started with Super 8, and then eventually, as soon as it was released on VHS, I bought it on VHS. When it was released on Laserdisc, I bought several Laserdisc versions of it. The first one that was released, and then they made some special editions, and then they made this box set that was incredible and cost like $200, and I bought that. I, of course, bought the very first DVD. I bought the very first issue on Blu-ray, and I have just bought the brand new 4K versions, which were struck from a brand new 4K digital transfer. And so, you know what? I love the film. I continue to celebrate it, and I've shared it with a lot of people. My kids love it. Star Wars is important to me, if you haven't figured that out. So that's my Star Wars story, and I hope you enjoyed going on this little trip back in time with me. I certainly had a lot of fun doing this, and so I hope that you will click subscribe, because I'm going to celebrate other films such as Jaws and other things, just kind of the cultural things that happened, the fun pop culture stuff. The 70s was a really fun time to grow up. It really was. There was also a lot of really awful stuff, attempts at entertainment. So I'm going to go into that stuff too. Anyway, I hope you'll join our little community, which is slowly building, and join me again for another episode of Only Kid with a Camera.
I love those J-I-N-G-L-E bells. Those happy J-I-N-G-L-E bells. Those holiday J-I-N-G-L-E-B-E-double-L-S. I love those J-I-N-G-L-E bells. I love those J-I-N-G-L-E bells. Those happy J-I-N-G-L-E bells. Those holiday J-I-N-G-L-E-B-E-double-L-S. I love those J-I-N-G-L-E bells. Jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Ooh, bop, bop.